Okay, so let's start the event. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We have this very exciting event ahead of us where, with collaboration with US University and the Guayaquil Space Society, we want to discuss a very important topic. And in this case, we want to tackle the importance, in this case, of international treaties. And in this case, the Artemis Accords. So we want to make the case for the Artemis Accords, why they are important and why is space important nowadays, especially for Ecuador in relationship with the United States. And we have some incredible guests today with us. We have Felipe Espinosa from American Chamber of Commerce. He's executive director, and he's been leading conversations between the US and Ecuadorian governments, in this case, towards more trade, more relationships, and more work together. So it's great to have him here with us. We also have with us former Vice President Alberto Dajic. Hello, Alberto. We're so glad that you're here joining us.
I'm glad, bro.
And he's currently the director for the Center of Economic and Social Studies
Thank you
for
very
Development,
much.
CESDE, at US University. Our other speakers that we're so glad that they're here with us is the other one is Mike Gold, and he's the Executive Vice President for Civil and External Affairs at Redwire. And he previously worked at NASA and other space companies, and he has this long trajectory of working with different space firms, and he has been instrumental for the United States, in this case, to have the Artemis Accords signed with many different countries around the world. And we also have Greg Autry. Greg Autry is a clinical professor from Thunderbird School of Global Management, and he has been involved also with NASA and space commercialization since its beginning. And it's great to have him with us because he's been one of the early proponents also of the Artemis Accords and commercialization of space and how other companies and the private sector can be more involved. We also have with us Santiago Velázquez from US University, and he's the Dean of the Law School. And we're very excited that he's also here with us. So today we have a very interesting group that is definitely, in this case, represented from US University, the Guayaquil Space Society. We have, I see some people from Thunderbird also here with us. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I would like to turn it over to Felipe Espinosa, who's going to say some important remarks regarding the state of relations between the United States and Ecuador currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to everybody. I remember the first time that Robert contacted us in AmCham, and we thought he was dreaming because he was talking about space and he was talking about technology and several other things. And such a great surprise because starting from the first event, it was a down-to-earth thing, if I might say, a down-to-earth with space technology. But it's incredible because so many things can be done through cooperation between different countries, through technology, through everything that can be done to better whatever is right now in Ecuador, sometimes in a really slow starting stage. So let me just take 5 minutes of your time because I think it's going to be much more interesting to listen to everybody else talk about really space technology and the Accords and the Artemis Accords and everything that goes with them. But let me just mention that we had some dark years in Ecuador where the relationship with our major trading partner, the US, was I'm going to use the word satanized by the government. But even so, even though the government was really, really against the development of relations between the two countries, and I'm talking mostly about commercial relations, those grew. They grew incredibly throughout those years. And after that, that era, that epoch, we've been trying to rebuild relationships between the two countries. If I might mention, to rebuild something is a lot harder than to build it from the start. And that has taken a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of people who are really vested into getting the best possibilities of commercial interchange between the two countries. But commercial interchange does not go only through the basis of trading, the basis of selling and buying. It goes along also with cooperation, with help in security, anti-drug fight, transparency, rule of law, anti-corruption, a lot of things that have been really, really needed in our country. So what can I say? Cooperation between our nations is always positive, and it has been incredibly supportive of Ecuador throughout the hard years, and also as we try to reconstruct the relationship. Right now, I'm going to say it in a capsule. We're working on improving the relationship with the U.S. Congress. The executive power in the States knows a lot more about Ecuador and the needs and what can be done through trade between the two countries, improvement, and hopefully in I don't know, in a near distant time where we can have a trade treaty between the two nations. But the Congress still does not know Ecuador profoundly. They still, there are some people that do know us. There are some people that know the needs of Ecuador. There are some people that know and look at the advantage for the United States on what Ecuador can sell to the US. We're complementary economies. We do not compete but in one or two things. And that complementary economy should be taken advantage of, and that's what we've been trying to tell people in the US. So that's a bit of an anecdote on what I can say about what we've been doing. But throughout all that effort, we've been regaining a lot of cooperation from the States. USAID is back in the country. They have they're investing money in our country. The DFC is lending money through banks, and they're probably going to start lending money directly to small farmers, which is very good for our country. And finally, we are a spot, and that's not a dark spot. We're a light in South America right now because our government is vested into developing better commercial relationships throughout the world. Our president has a saying that says, bring more world to Ecuador and bring more Ecuador to the world. And that is a connotation that if it can become true, it'll be very, very good for our economy. I don't want to take much longer, Robert, but you asked me to do an intro, and I think we just browse through what's happening right now. I really, really appreciate your invitation. I know this is going to be a great afternoon. We're going to listen to very, very interesting things. So thank you, Robert. Please, if you can, keep inviting me. It'll be great to be here. Thanks to everybody for the attention, and hope the afternoon goes much better from now on.
Thank you, Felipe. Those were some wonderful words. Thank you so much. Definitely, we're very encouraged, that Ecuador is open for business, and we definitely want Ecuador to be open for space. And with that, I'm definitely going to turn it over to economist Alberto Dajic. Thank you, Alberto, for joining us today. We're very excited. We would love to hear from your experience in working with international treaties?
Microphone.
You're muted, Alberto.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm glad to see Nelson here, who was in our government a key person in the Organización Internacional de Comercio agreement for Ecuador. Well, the history of the world shows very clear that international treaties, and especially those related to economic integration and to free trade and to technological cooperation, have been most fruitful for those countries who have embarked on the idea of cooperating with each other. Think, for instance, in what the NATO agreement did for the defense of Europe. Think of what the economic European Union did for Europe, and think of what the World Economic, the free trade that has been supported by international agreements, what it has done to the world. If you look at the figures of international trade in the 70s and 80s and thereafter, international trade has grown faster than world GDP. That shows clearly the impact that these treaties and these policies of integration, what they have done to the world. Now we have a new world in which especially these the Artemisa or Artemis agreements are, which I think there are 2 Latin American countries that have already joined, which are Brazil and Mexico. And one may think, well, this is really ridiculous, you know, exploring the moon and trying to colonize the moon and have a base on the moon to then explore Mars and try to bring minerals from the moon. Well, I am sure that a lot of people thought that Colón was crazy, you know, and he was really wrong in his attempt to find another route to the east. Think of the internet, for instance. What would we do without internet? Well, the internet was a military development. And one says, well, military research is useless. Well, think of what the world would be without it. Okay, there are so many things that are so useful, and they come, seem, or look, but they finally provide a huge impact to humankind. So I really hope that in Ecuador we understand the value of these efforts. Participating in a project like this, I am sure it is according to the country's capacity, but it's always very important to understand what the frontier of knowledge is, to understand Well, we cannot create artificial intelligence with the same efficiency as American or European universities or research centers, but we should certainly understand what it means, understand what it does. We cannot hope to conquer the moon or to develop a new rocket, but we have to understand what it means. In other words, the frontier of knowledge must be understood by every country. Otherwise, you just miss the train, as we say in Spanish. You miss the train. And if you miss the train, sometimes it takes a very long period until the new train comes. So the evidence of the past is highly conclusive, very powerful. The international cooperation has been very effective, and I'm going to take a clear example, which I thought I would use today, and it's the Bretton Woods Agreement, of which Ecuador was one of the 48 initial members, the foundation of the IMF and the World Bank. During the pandemic, the COVID crisis, Ecuador, which cannot print money, would have been devastated. Our economy would have been devastated if we had not had the cooperation of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other international organizations of which we are a member, or we are part of the agreements, bylaws that created those institutions. Ecuador received as a whole a package of $10 billion, without which the negative impact of -8% of GDP would have been perhaps 20%, and that would have meant a social crisis of unmanageable proportions. Well, it is an international treaty of which we are members, an institution that stemmed from or was created by international cooperation, which saved us in this crisis. Okay. So if we look at the future, Ecuador has to do everything as much as we can to have as many free trade agreements, as many as possible international cooperation agreements, technological transfer agreements, because isolation and the denial to accessing the international cooperation world means failure, means North Korea, means Venezuela, means total isolation, and finally a safe road to failure. I really hope that we understand these Artemisa and similar ideas, and we try to be within the limitations of our capacities, members of these efforts.
Thank you, Alberto. Those were some wonderful comments. We appreciate that feedback. Great food for thought. And with that, I would like to introduce now Mike Gold from Redwire, whose experience in leading the signature of the Artemis Accords has been fundamental. So, Mike, welcome. We're so glad that you're here with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I only wish I could be there in person. And, just a couple of comments. Appreciate all the wonderful words that were just said. I will say, not only do we need to bring Ecuador to the world and the world to Ecuador, now we need to bring Ecuador off the world and into other worlds. So that is the goal of the Artemis Accords. Also, we now have 3 Latin American countries, I'm glad to say. Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia recently signed as well. So very excited about the momentum that we're making. And again, Ecuador, as everyone has noted, is a special country. And it would be absolutely wonderful to have Ecuador a member of the Artemis family. So now I'm going to do the most difficult thing in the space world, which is trying to get my screen to share. You know, exploring space is easy. The Zoom meetings are what are probably more difficult than anything. Let me just verify that folks can see my screen.
Yes.
Wonderful. So you can't talk about the Artemis program or the Artemis Accords without first beginning with Artemis program. And as it sounds like many of you know, Artemis is our initiative at NASA and the international partners, as well as industry, to go back to the moon and to bring people back to the moon to stay. And the components of the Artemis program are, as you see in your upper left-hand corner here, the Space Launch System. This is the new rocket that's been built by NASA that will be the most powerful rocket ever deployed by humanity. And we're looking at the first launch on August 29th. So hopefully coming up this month will be an amazing moment. And this new, most powerful rocket ever will launch the Orion capsule, which you see on the bottom part of your screen. This is the capsule that will carry astronauts to the moon. There won't be any people on this first Artemis launch. It's a test of technology, but there will be on Artemis 2, which will follow that. And the idea is to use the SLS, Orion, and other space systems to build the gateway, which you see in the upper center of your screen. And this is an orbiting space station around the moon. It is a very manifestation of many of the international contributions of the partner nations. And then on the right, you see an even landing system and astronauts on the surface of the moon, which of course is the goal of the Artemis program, whose purpose is to put the first woman, the first person of color on the moon, hence the name Artemis, which is the sister of Apollo. I'd also like to take a moment just to draw out the differences between Apollo and Artemis. And if I could sum it up in one word, it's diversity. Beginning with diversity of people. You see in this image what the crew on Apollo looked like versus much more, and I believe the most diverse astronaut corps that NASA has ever had. But it's not just diversity of people, it's diversity of countries. That with Apollo, it was largely American-led, and America did most, if not almost all of the mission, whereas with Artemis, we are shooting for the goal of the broadest, most diverse global human spaceflight coalition in history. And Artemis Accords are the vehicle, of course, to achieve that. So we want to have great diversity in terms of the countries that participate. And then finally, diversity of organizations that the commercial space sector, which I'm now a member of, working for Redwire, as was noted, it didn't exist as it does today back in the 60s. So now, as we execute Artemis as opposed to Apollo, private sector will play a very large role supporting everything from cargo delivery to the gateway, again, the local station around the moon, as well as bringing the very astronauts to the surface of the moon via the human launch system. You see some of the companies that have been involved in past competitions and may be involved in the future. So it's just an extraordinarily exciting time as we not only go back to the moon, this time leverage diverse capabilities from all corners of the Earth and all different sectors of organizations. Now, the Accords, and the purpose of that is, again, to create a vehicle that will support this amazing, unparalleled global coalition to bring humanity back to the moon. And candidly, because the return to the moon was so popular, when I was back at NASA under Administrator Jim Bridenstine, the thought was that we could use this opportunity to gain support from countries around the world for norms of behavior in space that would create a peaceful, secure, and prosperous future on the moon and Mars for all of humanity to enjoy. And that's what the Artemis Accords are, an opportunity to push forward, to bring together this, again, amazing coalition, and to establish these norms of behavior, these principles, to create a future that we can all be proud of on the moon and on to Mars. And now I'll just take a moment to review what the principles of the Artemis Accords are. And it begins with peaceful purposes. Establishing a peaceful future in space is at the very heart of what the Accords are trying to accomplish. And therefore, any country that joins the Artemis mission must commit to its civil space program only participating in peaceful activities, that we want to go forward to the moon and Mars in peace. And so much of the Accords has been designed to support peaceful activities and to avoid conflict. And one of the best ways to avoid conflict is transparency. This is another aspect that's just the spine of the Accords. So much of our conflict on Earth is caused by confusion, misperceptions, miscommunications. And the best way that we have to prevent conflict is transparency, which is why a key principle of the Accords, and any country that joins agrees to be transparent relative to its activities in space, what it's doing, how it's doing it. And this theme of transparency you'll see throughout the principles of the Accords. Next is interoperability, that we not only want people to be able to talk to each other, but we need our machines, our vehicles, our spacecraft to be able to communicate. The more that we have interoperable space systems, the more conducive the environment will be on the moon and Mars for international cooperation and commercial growth as well. So you don't quite see it in the international treaties, but we believe achieving interoperability is incredibly important to achieve the international growth and international cooperation that we want to see as part of the Artemis mission. And here's an example of one principle of the Accords reinforcing the other: emergency assistance. It's obviously a core value that if you're going to conduct human space flight and there's another astronaut in distress, in need, we must rescue those astronauts. And that's why we ask any country joining the Artemis program, and I should stop saying we, it's not NASA anymore, but NASA's asking, for those countries to reaffirm the commitment to the United Nations agreement on the rescue of astronauts, the return of astronauts, the return of objects launched into outer space. It's fundamental that if there's an astronaut in distress, that we render assistance. And per the previous principle, the more interoperable systems are, the more efficient, effective, and safe any rescue operation would be for astronauts. Another fundamental aspect of the Accords and to achieve a peaceful, prosperous future in space is registration. That if we don't register properly, we can't get to issues of liability, avoiding conflict, etc. We must execute registration well. And therefore, for any country joining the Artemis Accords, they are committing to either, if they're already a member, reinforcing the values, needs, and the activities of the Registration Convention. And if a country isn't a member of the Registration Convention, committing to join the Registration Convention quickly. Here you see actually our red wire solar arrays. We roll out solar arrays that are active on the International Space Station now. It's a linear version of that, where these arrays are compacted and then roll out. Here you see a vertical setup, powering hopefully many systems on the moon in the future. Release of scientific data. We not only want for the NASA, for international partners to go to the moon, but we want to take the whole world with us back to the moon. And the beauty of the Artemis program is that anyone, regardless of who they are or where they are, as long as there's an internet connection, they can enjoy the awe, the discovery of the Artemis program, because the principle of Artemis is the full, complete, free sharing of scientific data. And again, for any country that joins Artemis, commits to the Accords, they are committing to fully releasing scientific data, which is so important because, again, then the world can enjoy the benefits of the Artemis mission. This is a pretty common sense principle, I believe, just like we honor and protect our heritage in museums here on Earth, we need to do the same on the moon and Mars. And here, for example, you see a picture of a human spaceflight mission. We not only need to protect our heritage for human spaceflight, but for robotic missions. Therefore, an important principle of the Accords is that the countries agree to protect heritage and that we'll respect heritage and preserve it for generations to come. Space resources. This is very important for sustainable lunar development, that we need to be able to live off the land to protect our astronauts and grow our future in space. And here, what countries that signed the Accords are agreeing to is that any space resource extraction should be done in full compliance with the Outer Space Treaty, and specific emphasis in Articles 2, 6, and 11. Probably everyone, if you don't have coffee, I'm not going to recite those here, and that extraction utilization of resources should be done in a sustainable manner. So space resources are very important, and they should be extracted and utilized in compliance with existing international obligations, specifically Article 2, 6, and 11 of the Outer Space Treaty. Actually, there you see one of our red wire printers. We are running experiments right now on the International Space Station using simulated lunar regolith and Mars regolith to see if we can print blocks out of that regolith on the International Space Station. And then later we hope to run demonstrations and actually build structures on the surface of the moon and eventually on Mars. Deconfliction of activities. So much of the Accords are to implement existing international obligations, specifically the obligations of the Outer Space Treaty. The Outer Space Treaty you can think of as the Constitution. It's the backbone, the foundation of international space law. But it's a high-level treaty. It's a treaty of very high-level principles. And what the Accords try to do is, while the Accords are still principles, to at least place a degree of specificity as to how we're going to achieve the objectives of the Outer Space Treaty. And this is a good example of that. The Outer Space Treaty states the principle and goal of avoiding harmful interference. Again, preserving peace, avoiding harmful interference among signatories. And the Accords take that down a level to describe how we will actually do that. And that's where the principle of the use of safety zones come in. The idea is for any country that's operating on the surface of the moon to be transparent per previous principles of the Accords and notify the United Nations what their activity is, where it's happening, and the area within which, if there was an accident or even just nominal operations, where there could be harmful interference with other activities. So first, that's that notification, the transparency, which is very important so that no one makes a mistake and there's an accident. Additionally, we're asking these countries that are operating on the moon or Mars, or asteroids and comets for that matter, to also coordinate with any other entity that is entering that area. Per the Outer Space Treaty, you could go anywhere on the surface of a celestial object. So it's very important that when activities are conducted, that countries are transparent about those activities and that they talk to each other to avoid conflict, to avoid harm, and allow for the harmonious development of the moon and Mars. And finally, as humanity, we need to do better in space than we have here on Earth. And certainly orbital debris has become a substantial problem for us on this planet. Let's avoid that as we go to the moon and Mars. And that's why a very important principle of the Accords is that for countries that move forward and launch objects, launch systems, and people to the moon, that they need to agree to at least have a plan for the mitigation of orbital debris, including the safe, timely, and efficient passivation and disposal of spacecraft so we can avoid having a debris problem around Mars like we have on Earth today. Again, let's do better in the future. The Accords were developed and negotiated with 8 space agencies as well as 8 foreign ministries. It was a very long and difficult, although very successful negotiation. It's where most of my gray hair had, or what gray hair I have, what didn't fall out. But we were very excited in October of 2020 to execute the Accords with 8 nations. And those nations were a combination of both traditional partners in space with the United States, such as Japan or Canada or Italy, but also we wanted to balance that with new nations that were jumping into the space world and to bring their unique diversity and voices and innovation, such as the United Arab Emirates, that has done amazing things in space in such a short amount of time, as well as new entrants such as Australia and Luxembourg. So we wanted to have both geographic and a balance of both new and established space agencies. I am very proud to say and very appreciative of what the leadership in the Biden administration has done to push forward with the Accords and sign far more countries than the initial 8 that were done in the previous administration. Even Vice President Harris, who personally done an amazing job talking about the Accords and gaining signatories, as well as, of course, Senator Nelson, the administrator of NASA, and Pam Melleroy, the deputy administrator of Popular Law, associate manager of the Office of Technology Policy and Strategy. Again, it's just been a wonderful team, and the Biden team at NASA have done an absolutely phenomenal job of pushing forward with the Accords. As you see in the countries that are all here, Ukraine had actually signed in 2020, but there have been numerous different countries from all across the world. My one correction for the information that was stated before is we're actually proud to have 3 Latin American countries with Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, as I mentioned before. And we would really like to add that fourth with Ecuador. Most recently, as you see on this slide, France and Saudi Arabia signed. And as you can see on the slide, there are many places left for new countries. And the beauty of the Accords is no matter how large your country is and how robust the investment might be in space with a country like France, for example, or how modest your country's resources are, there's a place for everyone in the Artemis program. Artemis contributions could range from lunar rovers, such as Japan has been discussing, to even just a few graduate students to look at lunar resources or to review lunar scientific data. So again, we hope that everyone in the world will take this journey with NASA, with the private sector to the moon, and it would be absolutely wonderful to have all of our friends in Ecuador become a part of this effort and to commit to the principles of the Accords and to become a part of the Artemis program. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over and look forward to answering any questions you all might have about the Artemis Accords. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great presentation, very insightful, so we can understand more about the details about the program. Now we're going to leave the questions towards the end, and we'll turn it over to Greg Autry. And Greg, we're so glad that you're here with us today, and you had a wonderful time visiting us in Ecuador, and we were very glad that you enjoyed your stay. And hopefully all the lessons that you learned here, you can definitely integrate into the opportunities, that Artemis can promise, countries like Ecuador to join, very much like what Mike said. Welcome, Greg. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you so much, Robert. And as Robert said, I was very pleased to have the opportunity to visit Ecuador and see some of you in person. It was an amazingly informative experience. Geographically, Ecuador obviously has some really interesting space advantages. One of the advantages that I noted while I was there that doesn't get considered a lot is there's an advantage to having a West Coast equatorial ocean area for down mass, for materials that will eventually become...
The volume is a bit low, Greg.
let me see if I can do anything about that. Is that better?
And while we're waiting, I want to say kudos to Greg on that worm logo. That looks fantastic.
Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying, Ecuador has some obvious unique geographic advantages. One of the ones we don't think about a lot, but I think is going to be increasingly important, is having a West Coast equatorial ocean. A lot of people are focused on the East Coast, Florida, for instance, in the United States, or the opportunity Kenya might have to launch equatorially over the ocean to the moon, and that's nice. But we're going to have things coming back, those down mass, particularly when we start transporting large amounts of material from the moon or manufactured goods, are going to come in, preferably in an equatorial area for reduced energy projection, and putting them in the ocean is probably the best way to do it. So I think there's a future there that's interesting. Robert's covered point-to-point travel. A lot of opportunities. I'm excited to engage. I think Artemis Accords is a perfect step for Ecuador to demonstrate their commitment to moving forward in space and partnering with the best nations in the world that are doing that. I think it's also great to see the fact that some of your neighbors like Brazil have come on board, but as is mentioned, Ecuador, more than any country, is really taking a positive pro-business approach. That's going to give you the opportunity to exploit this economic opportunity for the benefit of your citizens more than anybody else. I've had the opportunity to work with Mike for quite some time, first on the comm stack, and then when he went to NASA, we used to talk quite a bit about what was going on. And I was so pleased to see him and Administrator Bridenstine take on the plan that had initially been put together in the agency review team at NASA in 2016. And I was happy to do that. There were a lot of people on that team in the United States that came from different perspectives, people from the traditional space companies, people from the commercial space sector, scientists, business people, military, and we had a lot of arguing, to be perfectly honest. But the one thing we all absolutely agreed on was that America needed to go back to the moon. When we sat down and looked at how we were going to do that, we realized we had to have partners. NASA could not do the Apollo program again and just seize 5% of the federal budget and do a big stunt. We had to bring our international partners and our commercial companies on board with their capabilities, people and capital to make it happen. And more than anything, it's not the Cold War. It's not a situation where we need to prove ourselves. What we need to do is achieve something great with other countries for the benefit of the whole planet. So that was the obvious thing to do. We also agreed about the diversity thing right out the gate, and you'll note that Administrator Bridenstine was quickly talking about putting a woman on the moon even before the current administration came in, who has obviously a huge commitment to the concept of diversity, but that was always part of the plan. And it was beautiful to watch it executed. And I have to echo Mike's praise, even though I had 3 appointments from President Trump, the Biden administration has been right on target with this plan. And the team there at NASA, particularly Bahavi Lal, have done an amazing job in maintaining the continuity and enthusiasm for the program. And everybody I know in the space community in the US is aligned on this, which is just a rare thing to see, and gives us an opportunity to ensure the commitment we make to countries like yours when you step up is that we're actually going to do this job, and that you won't see the next president come in and flip this project like has honestly happened in several recent administrations. This time we have continuity, and it feels good. So thank you so much for being here and inviting me.
Greg, thank you so much. It was great to hear those comments. Now I would like to introduce Santiago Velázquez from US University. Santiago is the dean of the law school. Welcome, Santiago. We're glad that you're here with us.
Ahí está, ¿no? ¿Lo están viendo todos? Okay. Hi, everybody. Nice to be with you tonight. In my case, I'm going to talk to you in Spanish because, as you can see, the presentation is reading in Spanish. So I prefer to doing that. And I was reading the assistant list, and I can notice that the majority of people can understand Spanish. So I prefer to do in that language, and I'm going to do in that way. Hemos escuchado hasta este momento una serie de intervenciones en las que podemos ya tener una idea bastante clara sobre el tema del proyecto Artemis. Yo voy a dedicar unos pocos minutos a hacer unas reflexiones en lo que tiene que ver con el derecho de naturaleza espacial. Y lo primero que quisiera es básicamente enfocarnos en el hecho de la importancia de tener un derecho al que consideremos como espacial. Y esto se puede ver pues, de múltiples aristas o con ejemplos muy sencillos, como por ejemplo el tema de la contaminación que está viniendo, el hecho de los descubrimientos que se están realizando a través de proyectos científicos en el espacio, actividades de naturaleza totalmente comercial como el turismo espacial, que es prácticamente una realidad hoy en día, y desde luego pues una serie de facetas adicionales. En realidad podríamos decir que de una u otra forma todas las relaciones jurídicas que se presentan en nuestro planeta pueden ocurrir perfectamente en el espacio, de tal manera que hoy es perfectamente posible hablar de la existencia de un derecho espacial. En ese sentido, pues ya existen pues, hasta definiciones múltiples, diversas de lo mismo, pero que creo que no vale la pena pues, detenerse en específicamente una u otra, simplemente muestro algunas, con la cual pues, puede verse pues, la amplitud del contenido y de la temática pues, del derecho espacial. Por otra parte, pues las denominaciones pues, no es una parte pacífica en cuanto al denominado pues, Space Law, dado que dependiendo de los autores que consultemos, pues podemos tener múltiples denominaciones. Yo sí quisiera también hacer hincapié, y eso es muy importante con el tema de los acuerdos Artemis, que estamos dando un salto de carácter cualitativo en cuanto al tratamiento desde el punto de vista normativo de las relaciones jurídicas que se presentan en el espacio. El derecho espacial básicamente nace como consecuencia de unas manifestaciones de derecho internacional y en una tradición inicial, llamémoslo así, del derecho internacional, los sujetos básicamente son los estados y las organizaciones internacionales intergubernamentales. Obviamente, pues esa noción ya en el derecho internacional público hoy en día pues ha sido superado y los particulares podemos tener también esa aptitud jurídica en ciertas ramas de actuar directamente en situaciones regladas por el derecho internacional. Lo mismo ocurre con el derecho espacial, que en su formulación inicial de los cuerpos normativos a los que conocemos como corpus juris espacialis, consideraban esa noción básica del derecho internacional de estados y organizaciones de naturaleza pública como sujetos de derecho espacial. Hoy, con manifestaciones como las que señalo y con situaciones como las que se van a presentar en los años próximos, sin duda, pues los particulares también pueden ser considerados como sujetos del derecho espacial. Como toda rama jurídica, pues se nutre de algunas fuentes, principalmente en este caso de convenciones internacionales. Debemos entender aquí el término convención no como el sinónimo de tratado, sino en general abarcando los distintos tipos de instrumentos internacionales que no necesariamente tienen la jerarquía de ser tratados, y ese es el caso de los acuerdos Artemis, por ejemplo. La costumbre internacional obviamente juega un rol pues, fundamental. Situaciones como las que se exponen en la diapositiva, el mero hecho de que cuando sale la misión Sputnik en el año 1957 y atraviesa, pues, digamos, los territorios de los diversos estados y estos no reclaman, pues desde ese momento, por costumbre internacional, se puede pues, atravesar aquellos territorios para las fases de lanzamiento o retorno de un vehículo espacial. De igual manera, pues como cualquier rama pues, del derecho ha ido generando sus propios principios generales que no son, pues, ni podrían ser tampoco contrarios a los principios generales del derecho. Básicamente, el Tratado del Espacio del año 1967 recoge la cooperación internacional, el deber de información, la no apropiación nacional, el estatus de astronautas como enviados de la humanidad, la responsabilidad internacional de los estados y el respeto a los derechos de propiedad intelectual dentro del Estado. La jurisprudencia también se ha constituido la fuente del derecho espacial. Tenemos múltiples casos ya en algunas legislaciones célebres, Baird versus Reaction Motors Division, Hughes Aircraft versus USA, Nemitz versus NASA, Lunar Embassy en China, es decir, ya hay también un acervo de carácter jurisprudencial por medio del cual los tribunales han tenido oportunidad de pronunciarse e incorporar contenidos a lo que conocemos como derecho espacial. Es importante tener en consideración que dado pues la importancia de la utilización desde el espacio, Naciones Unidas ha creado una comisión específica para el efecto que tiene pues dos subcomisiones, ¿no? Una de carácter científico y técnico y otra de subcomisión jurídica, la cual pues están en vigor o en pleno funcionamiento ya desde fines de la década de los 50 del siglo pasado. Instrumentos normativos, pues tenemos múltiples resoluciones de Naciones Unidas ya desde el año 1961 y lo que les señalaba hace un momento, lo básico es lo que se denominamos como cuerpos iures espaciales, que formado por el Tratado del Espacio del año 1967, el Convenio de Desarmamento de 1968, el Convenio sobre Responsabilidad de 1972, el Convenio sobre Registros de 1975 y el Acuerdo sobre la Utilización de la Luna de 1979. Además de eso, pues más recientes, encontramos algunas resoluciones, como por ejemplo relacionadas al análisis del estatus jurídico de los estados de lanzamiento, las directrices de las Naciones Unidas para reducción de desechos espaciales, las recomendaciones para las mejoras de la práctica de los estados y organizaciones internacionales para el registro de objetos espaciales. Cada uno de estos instrumentos normativos que yo he referido como que conforman el corpus iure espaciales, pues tienen una serie de temas que de alguna u otra manera son reproducidos en los acuerdos Artemis, pero naturalmente pues ya trayéndolos a las realidades del avance de la tecnología y lo que significa pues la exploración espacial, más o menos 50 o 60 años después de que estos cuerpos normativos han sido expedidos, ¿no? Y se centran pues fundamentalmente pues en el hecho pues del uso pacífico del espacio, la cooperación internacional, la reciprocidad, el deber de informar y otros. Hay instrumentos básicos en los cuales pues ya quedan consignados las obligatoriedades del deber de salvamento, algo también hay de eso en los Artemis y ya nos lo han comentado en una intervención anterior, el deber de búsqueda, la devolución segura y otra serie de aspectos, ¿no? El convenio sobre responsabilidad de 1972, básico pues por los accidentes que se dan en el espacio y por lo que Dios no quiera podrían darse pues también como consecuencia de las contaminaciones y demás que los residuos espaciales que puedan entrar a la atmósfera pudieran llegar a generar. Y así podríamos seguir comentando cada uno de ellos. Tenemos un acuerdo específico sobre la Luna del año 1979, en el cual pues se reitera el carácter de la utilización de la Luna con fines específicamente pacíficos, que su exploración y utilización es algo que incumbe a la humanidad en general, que la explotación y la investigación de la misma deberá darse sobre la base del principio de igualdad, que no se puede perjudicar el equilibrio del medio lunar, el compromiso de no contaminación y otros aspectos de naturaleza similar, ¿no? Bueno, hemos citado ya que existen algunos otros instrumentos, muchísimas, dado que la Oficina de Naciones Unidas, como también hemos señalado, tiene pues específicamente competencias en la temática, pues, y dado pues que también se ha reconocido, como suele pues existir algunas competencias de carácter legislativo derivadas de órganos establecidos por convenios, eso sí, pues existe también pues aquí lo que solemos denominar como soft law, ¿no? Un derecho pues, que no necesariamente llega a la jerarquía de un tratado, pero que no por eso deja de ser derecho y no deja de tener su aplicación en el ámbito internacional. Entonces, en estos últimos tiempos hemos estado presenciando cómo ha surgido estos acuerdos Artemis, que básicamente lo que contiene son principios para la cooperación en la exploración y utilización de los civiles de la Luna, Marte, cometas y asteroides con fines eminentemente pacíficos, desde luego, y que se basa pues en los recientes planes también pues de los Estados Unidos y su gobierno pues de poder regresar a la Luna, explotación que estaba programada para el año 2024 y aparentemente podría tener un ligero retraso de un año. Entonces, evidentemente los parámetros o los radios de acción de cómo se va a dar esta situación son bastante diferentes a aquellos que regían pues o que se establecían durante la época de las misiones Apolo, y esto ha merecido pues también esta actualización y estos compromisos que van adquiriendo los estados que se van uniendo a los acuerdos Artemis, los cuales esperamos que pronto el Ecuador pueda adherirse y formar parte pues, de los mismos, ¿verdad? Entonces, realmente, pues, la descripción de estos acuerdos Artemis viene o consiste en definitiva en una visión común para, a través de principios, directrices y prácticas, poder tener reglas de gobernanza para la exploración y utilización civiles del espacio ultraterrestre. Esa es la finalidad principal de los acuerdos Artemis. Para aquello, pues evidentemente, pues también deberán pues, ejecutarse algunas acciones desde el punto de vista de los documentos de carácter internacional, que van desde memorandos de entendimiento hasta arreglos de ejecución y otro tipo de documentos que puedan generarse entre los Estados miembros de Artemis. ¿Y qué es lo que básicamente deben contener todos esos instrumentos que puedan generarse a la sombra de los Estados Artemis? Normativas en relación a la responsabilidad sobre los derechos de propiedad intelectual, la transferencia de bienes y los datos de carácter técnico. Debe también pues insistirse una vez más y recordar a todos los estados que la suscripción de estos documentos y la exploración y utilización de tanto de la Luna como de los demás componentes del espacio exterior, pues debe hacerse con fines eminentemente pacíficos y de conformidad siempre con el derecho internacional pertinente. Se recuerda y se insiste en el compromiso que tienen los estados partes de realizar todos los esfuerzos razonables para brindar la asistencia necesaria al personal que estuviere o llegara a estar en peligro en el espacio ultraterrestre y reconocer sus obligaciones en virtud del acuerdo sobre el salvamento. Recordemos que ya existía con anterioridad pues también un acuerdo específico sobre el salvamento, pero que hay unas adecuaciones o puntualizaciones propias de las nuevas circunstancias tecnológicas y del nivel actual de la explotación espacial. La protección de datos científicos pues merece pues un capítulo específico, una sección entera en los acuerdos Artemis. Se mantiene el derecho de difundir información al público sobre las actividades, el intercambio de información de carácter abierto en cuanto a los datos científicos y que esto no aplica para operaciones del sector privado. La preservación del patrimonio del espacio ultraterrestre, lo cual pues se deriva pues de ese compromiso inicial asumido ya hace algunas décadas pues de la explotación, reconociendo pues que el espacio extraterrestre pues le pertenece a la humanidad toda. Se debe mostrar pues que el uso de los recursos espaciales va a traer beneficios a la humanidad, el manejo de la extracción y utilización de recursos especiales bajo reglas seguras y sostenibles, la información de la actividad sobre extracción de recursos espaciales y la utilización debida pues de la experiencia que pueda desarrollarse o obtenerse luego pues de la explotación de carácter espacial. Entonces, esto es lo que recoge en definitiva pues una serie de situaciones muy específicas por parte de los acuerdos Artemis y creo yo que las condiciones están dadas para que el Ecuador pueda a la brevedad adherirse a los mismos. Creo pues que con razón del tiempo asignado no corresponde ya hacer o expandirse más en lo que tiene que ver con la intervención y les agradezco por la oportunidad. Buenas noches.
Santiago, thank you very much. That was a wonderful explanation, and we share your excitement about that Ecuador is ready to be able to sign these important accords. Now we would like to open this for questions and answers from the public. So if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, please go ahead.
Robert, first of all, I would like to thank the speakers of this virtual forum for sharing their knowledge on the subject matters that they share with us. And I would like to make a reflection to our Ecuadorian citizens in the sense that we should be able to impulse that our country also be part of the Artemis Accords. Like Alberto Dajic was telling us, while he was vice president of the country, he was the conductor of the economy, and we negotiated under the government of President Sixto Duran the accession of Ecuador to the World Trade Organization, which was very complex because we were kind of late in that membership. And our country was the first one actually to enter in the transition from the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs to the World Trade Organization. And at this point, we are, like kind of in a good time to enter the Artemis Accords. And that allows us to benefit better from whatever the Accords can offer us. We're seeing this, the price of getting late into Accords, for example, with our partner, the USA, when we didn't finish the negotiation of the trade agreements like Peru and Colombia, and it's costing us much more to get that into effect. So I think it would be a good idea for the participants to read the Artemis Accords in not too long, and then join the forces in Ecuador to try to insist on our country in becoming a part of these accords.
Thank you, Nelson. That's very good supporting words. Really appreciate it. We have two more questions. We have Pankaj. Pankaj is a student right now at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, and he's a former executive from the Indian Space Agency. Pankaj, we're glad that you're here and joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert, for the invitation. And thank you so much for this to all the speakers. And my question is, since limited number of countries have joined Artemis program, and it being a bilateral agreement between US and other countries, is there any plans to actively engage other potential countries to join the Artemis Accord? It's my question is to the first two speakers, Professor Greg and Mike.
So first, let me say you're getting a great education at Thunderbird. There's incredible professors, one in particular. Kind of excellent question I would expect from people coming from Thunderbird. First of all, there have been 21 countries that have signed the Artemis Accords in less than 2 years, which is an amazing pace, and we believe demonstrates the hunger for norms behavior, for principles to implement the Outer Space Treaty, the Registration Convention, the Agreement on the Rescue of Astronauts. So we could not be more pleased with how quickly the Accords have been embraced. Additionally, and I think this is a wonderful point for all of Ecuador to take into consideration, the Accords are not a treaty. The Accords are not legally binding. They're a political commitment relative to these principles, and no one needs permission to sign the Accords. Any country at any time can execute the Accords. And certainly our friends at NASA, Department of State, as well as those in the private sector, such as myself and academia like Greg, are trying to do all we can for forums like this to encourage countries to sign the Accords, to join, and to commit to what we believe are these common sense principles which implement the Outer Space Treaty. And again, I want to emphasize this point that the Outer Space Treaty is wonderful, but we need to take a step forward to actually find ways to implement the goals and objectives of the Outer Space Treaty. And again, since the Accords are not legally binding and are a political commitment, that usually makes it a lot easier for countries to go through their internal processes to sign the Accord. So I believe that there will be many more nations to sign. Again, we've been very pleased with the number that have done it now, and Greg and myself and all of us across the world who are members of the Artemis Accords family just want more diversity, more unique voices, and we would love to have Ecuador as part of this chorus for scientific exploration and development.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, let me just echo that. And Mike, Thunderbird has your check in the mail there. But no, seriously, our goal from the beginning was, to make this as broad as possible, Pankaj. So I personally would love to see India up there. If you look at the configuration for Gateway, one of the assumptions is that the Russians would provide an important module for that. And I'm kind of getting the idea that that's not so likely right now. And who has a aggressive new human space program? That India would be fantastic to see India step up and help fill that position. But there's a whole lot of other countries we could work with. But we're excited to be talking to Ecuador today, and hope that actually being number 22 will make you one of the early countries in the plan, and not one of the last ones.
Absolutely. And if I just echo, Greg, first of all, I've been learning from Greg for years and years, and I've never had to pay tuition. So I feel like I've already gotten my check in the mail just from learning from Greg. And relative to India, I think it's very important to note that the Accords actually represent a common ground between nations that have signed the Moon Treaty and those that explicitly opposed the Moon Treaty. So, India, I know, likes to maintain non-alignment and to be objective, to be neutral. And the Accords actually allow for that. And again, the Accords simply represent a commitment to implementation of the principles of the Outer Space Treaty, Registration Convention, other international obligations, as well as a few other principles that, again, we believe are common sense, such as the full, free, open release of scientific information and interoperability. So India absolutely would be welcome and believe they could do so while still maintaining strong relationships with every nation across the world.
Thank you so much. I hope so.
That would be amazing, definitely, to get more countries involved for this not to stop. We have another question from a member of the Guayaquil Space Society, Marcos Moreira, and then we'll go to Misael Benalcázar. His question is, when will we have the need to create space law careers in our universities? How do you foresee that?
About 20 years ago is when you'll have the need. The exciting thing is Mike is an actual space lawyer. Many people don't know that. I think sometimes he says he's a recovering space lawyer, but he was chief legal counsel for a major commercial startup that got going 2 decades ago, and unfortunately didn't result in a huge economic success for Mike, but developed some technologies that you're going to see deployed extensively. My friend Michelle Hanlon, who's president of the National Space Society, is a space lawyer, so they are out there. And Mike, I'll let you explain why.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really important to have good space lawyers, good policy law. So as Greg mentions, I'm a recovering attorney, so I'm biased, but I almost think that engineering is the easy part of all of this. Getting good policy, good laws, regulations that encourage development. These are some of the largest challenges that we face. And as Greg says, that's why we needed, good space lawyers in the space program 20 years ago, because we've actually got a dearth, I think, in the space policy world, and particularly we use more support from academia. Greg does a great job. Can't be everywhere all the time. So I'd like to see more academics, more space law programs take a look at these critical issues. Because again, candidly, the politics, the financing, the legal structures, regulatory barriers for space is potentially as important, if not more so, than many of the technical challenges that we face.
Thank you, Mike. And now we have a question from Misael Benalcázar. Misael, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for all the talk. Thank you so much for all the speakers. My question is, does the NASA have inside their plans to use blockchain technology, or what are the uses that they could give to this decentralized technology?
So the question was, does NASA have any plans to use blockchain technology to decentralize processes?
Correct.
Yeah, Mike's a lawyer and I'm a policy person. I was a software engineer. I'm a recovering software engineer. There's a lot of blockchain applications that make sense for space, particularly involving encryption. And you're going to see a lot of quantum computing in space as well, which I think are really interesting. I would not consider myself to be an expert at the specifics of it. I do think that when we get to the point where we're extracting and exploiting resources, blockchain has applications in identifying those. There might also be applications in space traffic management for tracking unique objects. But other than that, I would refer you to somebody a little more technical than I. Mike, do you have anything to say?
Oh boy, dangerous if you're looking for someone more technical. I would say that NASA is probably not going to be the first to use blockchain, but NASA may be enabling private sector entities that would leverage blockchain on the International Space Station and via other operations. So where I would expect to see blockchain, even maybe cryptocurrency in space first, is coming more from the private sector, which NASA might enable or act as a platform for, rather than the space agency itself.
Thank you so much for the answers. And with that, we've gone a little bit over our time. And I definitely want to thank US University for participating, joining these in this session today, and to our speakers. Thank you, Economista Alberto Dajik. Thank you, Mike Gold. Thank you, Greg Autry. And thank you to Felipe Espinosa. And thank you also to Santiago Velázquez. You guys have been wonderful. We're really interested in getting the Ecuadorian government and its people excited about space. And I think the Artemis Accords are a good opportunity to move forward with this. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Robert.